start to climb this final sort of 35, 40-foot section, peering off over that ledge with that drop sort of down to my left-hand side. And it was only as I transferred my weight from my right to my left leg, and as I leant to say something, that the section of rock that I just happened to be stood on, which was probably 4 foot wide and 2 foot deep, broke away from the top of World's End and dropped and tilted and sort of peeled off. And obviously I went with it. I knew that there was a 180-foot drop below me, and really the chances of surviving were slim. For me, the most important part of this journey isn't the accident itself, it's not the injury itself. And I didn't know how I'd been injured at that point. I knew I couldn't feel my legs and move my legs, but I didn't know what had happened. It was a very simple promise, but it was a very difficult promise to make all at the same time. So in that moment, I was scared. I didn't feel very resilient. I didn't feel very brave. I didn't feel very courageous. I felt the opposite of all of those things. But I knew that if I was to get myself through this somehow, it would have to start with me taking accountability for what was going to happen. I promised myself that whatever happened, just don't let it beat you.
That started what was a 5-month journey through intensive care. I always remember coming around the next morning after a 9-hour surgery with a surgeon stood at the end of my bed. And so as I'd landed on my back, I'd broken my back at T6 and I'd severed my spinal cord. Now, I didn't know what any of that meant, really. And in my head, as long as I worked hard enough and I gave it a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, however long I needed to, there would come a day where I would walk. And there'd come a day when I was back in the mountains. And what the surgeon stood and said was the opposite. I'm really sorry, Darren, but for you it means that you'll never walk again, and we can say that with an absolute degree of certainty. And it means that your life's going to look an awful lot different to what it did yesterday. And he said, but there's one bit of advice that I'd love to say, and it is about looking forward, not looking backwards. He said, often how you overcome these things is your ability to look to the future and the doors that have just opened and not look over your shoulder to the doors that have just closed. It's not about how you feel, it's about who you're trying to become. Ultimately, what was a multi-year process led me to my first kind of big leap forward that really gave me faith that life with a spinal injury or life with a disability could be just as promising and the horizon just as bright. And I called up 5 of my friends that I'd met through the military rehab process. So 5 people that had each had something that had categorically changed their sense of where they thought they were going in life. And I called them up and I pitched them a simple idea. The idea was, do you fancy kayaking from Land's End to John O'Groats? So no one had ever done it. It's across the Atlantic Ocean, the Bristol Channel, the Irish Sea, the North Sea. It's about 1,400 kilometres. I reckoned it would take us about a month. And this is just one picture from what was a 26-day expedition across, some of the most challenging coastal waters in Europe. And it really pushed the boundary of what I thought was possible for me with a spinal injury, and likewise for the other 4, it pushed their collective boundaries of what they thought possible for somebody with a stroke or somebody with an amputation, an amputee. And we arrived at John O'Groats 26 days later, and for me, I think the future looked bright, and the future looked brighter than perhaps, my future before my injury maybe ever did. I remember saying yes before I knew what on earth. It was just the name. The name got me. World Marathon Challenge sounded cool. So what it is 7 marathons, 7 consecutive days, 7 continents. So I think 150 people in history had done it to this point, Ranulph Fiennes being one of them. Before you know it, it's day 1, you've just landed in northern Antarctica, the temperature's about -27, the wind speed's about 60 miles an hour, and you're kind of, crossing this frozen landscape. And for me, there was a huge degree of unknowns and uncertainty. Finally, 7 long days later, it's 2 a.m. local time in Miami. That has been the end point of this story so far, trying to pursue that bigger, wider purpose. It's led to things that I never thought I would achieve in my life.